Today I'm going to talk about how to teach students to find themes through the children's books. So I will be discussing how do I use charts to discover theme, how to use figurative language and literary devices to discover theme, and how to compare a theme from a children's book to poetry. So the book I really like to use is Alexander's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day by Judith Viorst. And it's a really good book because it's a theme that we can all identify with. So when I first start this lesson on how to find theme, I pass out this chart and I go over the story, Alexander's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. I read it to the students. They have a typed copy with them so they can follow along. And the figurative language, I actually give them the figurative language, so there's no guessing there. We're going to be looking for hyperbole, listing, repetition, mood, and all of that's going to develop the theme. The other thing that I do for students is I put in the definitions. So they know exactly what we're going to be looking for and exactly what these words mean. We all have the same working definition. And I think this is really important that students have these things before they start so they know they're not spending their time trying to remember or looking things up or trying to guess which figurative language or devices they're going to be looking for. It's not a scavenger hunt. It really is, this is what we're looking for. These are the definitions, and we'll be looking for examples and effects created. So when we do this, I read the story to them, they have a copy of the story with them, and then we go through and we find examples of hyperbole, listing, repetition, mood, and then we discuss the theme. So at the end of the first part of the lesson, they will have a chart that's filled out that will look very similar to this. And as you can see here, in the examples and the effects created, we look at the words. We put the words in quotations so they have their textual evidence. They know where to find this information again. Okay, so we put it in there. And then we have the effect that is created. The hyperbole shows how terrible his day was. The listing gives us everything that went wrong during the day. The repetition, again, with the hyperbole tells us how bad Alexander is feeling and trying to get as far away from these feelings as possible. The mood with the hyperbole, listing, and repetition creates how frustrated Alexander is and how he's having this bad day that nobody seems to understand. So a universal theme based on these figurative language and devices is that everyone has bad days, and that's just the way life is. And what's really neat about doing it this way is that the kids can see what the examples are and discover what the effects are created. And then the theme here is something that we can all identify with. So everybody has these bad days. Now obviously this is not the lesson that we're teaching for the literature. Usually the literature that I need to teach for theme is The Rainy Day by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Now what I do is I again give them the empty chart, but I'm using the exact same devices and figurative language that we saw in Alexander's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. And this is really important because that way they all have they're looking at the same devices. Okay, we're still looking at hyperbole, listing, repetition, mood, and theme. Now if we look over here, this is what the kids would get. Now usually what I do is after we've done the chart with Alexander's Day, this I usually have them do with smaller groups. So they work on this in smaller groups and I can kind of go around and help them out. But I still read the poem out loud to them and we talk a little bit about what are some of the things you see, what are some of the things you hear. So we do kind of imagery together. But then I let them go with this, and then at the end of the lesson or at the end of the small group time, we put this together so everybody has basically the same chart when they're all done. Now, I really like doing this with the kids because it's not a guessing game. They know exactly what's being expected, what they need to be doing, how it needs to be done, and all of that good stuff. Once we get the two charts completed, we can do compare and contrast. So how is this theme universal? So the theme is everyone has bad days. It's presented in both pieces. How is this? Well, if we look at Alexander, he lists everything that goes wrong that day. He's very frustrated because he's having a bad day. And we can relate to this because we've all had bad days like this. This is not something foreign or uncommon to people. The narrator of the poem compares the icky weather to his day, and he's struggling with this bad day just like Alexander is, and we can relate to that. Icky weather and frustration can create a bad day. So we can see that although Alexander is listing everything that goes wrong, the narrator of the poem is just comparing his day to the icky weather. That's kind of a list of things that are happening. Both of them are struggling with the bad day. They're both kind of frustrated. And we can relate to both situations because we've all had, just gloomy days in our lives, and that's just the way it is. We can look at some differences as well. Alexander doesn't realize that everyone has bad days until the very end, until his mother tells him this. But the narrator, who's an adult, does understand that every day will be like this. And the quotes in here are very important to have because then the kids can go back when they write their paragraphs or their papers or whatever activity, the writing activity you're going to have with this can go with this, is there. Be still, sad heart, and cease repining. Behind the clouds, the sun is still shining. That's the same thing that Alexander says. My mom says some days are like that, even in Australia. So we can see how even though they don't always understand why, because Alexander is a child, the narrator is an adult, but some days are just like that, and that's just the way life is sometimes. So, and it's really nice to do it like with the chart so they can see everything. We talk about how this theme is universal. We talk about how both pieces develop the theme through those literary devices. We have, as readers, can identify with both protagonists, and because we can make this personal connection with the literature, this theme is universal. Because we can see Alexander's terrible day, and we can see the narrators from the rainy day's terrible day, we can make that personal connection a little bit better than if we had just done the rainy day. Because not every kid will automatically go, oh yeah, I'm repining and it's a bad day, blah, 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 blah. They're not going to get that, but they're going to understand I'm having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. But it's the same thing. And that's why this theme is universal. I really like this method because the students are led through the process. We start with the children's story, which is easier for the students to understand. They also find it incredibly humorous. They tend to giggle through it. And that humor kind of helps to motivate them to look more for these pieces. I like that I give them everything so they are told exactly what we're looking for. This is not a guessing game at all. We're not doing literary analysis just to trip kids up. This is what we're looking for, and how does this work towards our theme? It is a very concrete process into this abstract world. Okay, I try to make sure that we use the same literary devices for both pieces. So if I'm using a children's story, I'm going to use the same literary devices that are in the poetry. And that's the difficult. You can't just pick any old children's story to go with any old poem. They need to be connected somehow. And I really like to focus on themes that connect to us. I teach middle school kids, and if they connect it back to themselves, it makes it a little more concrete. This whole abstract idea of theme is a little more concrete. Today I went over how to use the chart to discover theme, look at the figurative language and the devices to discover theme, and comparing that theme in a children's book to a piece of poetry. And if you are a standards-based school, that would be the standards that are covered. If you have any questions, go ahead and just reach out to me. Thanks. Bye.